She sang songs about love, joy, and togetherness. Her voice helped define the golden era of soul music. But behind the spotlight, behind the smile, was a young woman enduring pain few could see. Fame gave her applause. Life gave her heartbreak. This is the tragic story of Tammi Terrell. Before the fame, before the bright Motown lights, Tammi Terrell was born Thomasina Montgomery in Philadelphia in 1945. She grew up in a working-class neighborhood filled with church music, street harmonies, and the sound of classic rhythm and blues floating from apartment windows. From an early age, she had something rare, a voice that carried emotion far beyond her years. As a teenager, she was already performing in talent shows, captivating crowds with powerful vocals and natural stage presence. Music wasn't just a dream. It was her escape, her purpose, her way out. By age 17, she caught the attention of legendary producer James Brown, who invited her to join his touring revue. It was her first taste of life on the road. Bright lights, long nights, endless pressure. But this opportunity would come with a dark cost. Working with James Brown was supposed to be the opportunity of a lifetime. He was already known as the hardest-working man in show business, a perfectionist whose electrifying performances were changing the sound of American music. For a young singer like Tammi, joining his touring revue meant national exposure, professional growth, and a fast track into the industry. But life on the road was far from glamorous. Tour buses replaced normal routines. Late nights replaced rest, and strict control replaced creative freedom. James Brown demanded perfection from everyone around him. Missed notes were not tolerated. Mistakes were met with public criticism. Rehearsals were long, exhausting, and emotionally draining. Behind the stage lights, tension filled the air. Those who traveled with the tour would later describe an environment ruled by fear and pressure, where young performers felt they had little voice and even less protection. Tammi was still a teenager, far from her family, far from the comfort of home, surrounded by powerful figures in an industry that rarely safeguarded young women. Reports from people close to the tour spoke of explosive tempers, controlling behavior, and moments that crossed the line from discipline into intimidation. The emotional weight became overwhelming. What began as a dream opportunity slowly turned into a painful lesson about the darker side of fame. Tammi eventually made the difficult decision to leave the tour. She walked away from one of the biggest names in music, not because she lacked talent or ambition, but because she needed safety, stability, and space to breathe. The experience left scars, but it also left her stronger, wiser, more determined to find success on her own terms. And soon, she would arrive at a place that promised elegance, opportunity, and stardom. A Detroit label that was quietly building a musical empire. A place called Motown Records. When Tammi arrived at Motown Records, it felt like stepping into a different world. Motown wasn't just a record label. It was a musical machine, a finishing school for stars. An empire carefully crafting elegance, polish, and crossover appeal for Black artists in a divided America. Artists were trained in etiquette, in stage presence, in choreography, in how to speak to the press. Image mattered just as much as talent, and Tammi had both. She carried herself with natural grace, stylish, soft-spoken, and radiant. But beneath that gentle presence was a powerful voice filled with warmth and emotion. Motown executives quickly realized she possessed something special. She didn't just sing lyrics. She made people feel them. Producers experimented with different pairings, searching for the right musical chemistry. Then came the partnership that would change everything. Tammi Terrell and Marvin Gaye. From their very first recording session, the connection was undeniable. Their voices blended like conversation between two hearts. Smooth, natural, intimate. They didn't sound like two soloists sharing a track. They sounded like a real couple in love. Listeners believed every word. And soon, the hits began stacking up. Ain't No Mountain High Enough became an anthem of devotion. Your Precious Love captured the vulnerability of romance. Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing celebrated authentic connection. Radio stations couldn't stop playing them. Record stores couldn't keep the singles stocked. Television appearances multiplied. Concert crowds grew louder. Tammi and Marvin became Motown's golden duo, symbols of young love, hope, and musical harmony. On stage, their chemistry looked effortless. They smiled at each other, locked eyes between verses, moved in perfect rhythm. Fans felt like they were witnessing something genuine, something magical. But the public only saw the performance. They didn't see the exhaustion behind the curtain. The non-stop touring schedule, the cross-country flights, the pressure to deliver hit after hit. Motown's success came with relentless demands. And Tammi, still in her early 20s, carried the weight of expectation on fragile shoulders. Even as headaches began to interrupt rehearsals, even as fatigue crept into her voice, she kept going. Because in the world of Motown, the show never stopped, and stars were expected to shine, no matter the personal cost. To the world, Tammi Terrell was glowing. Magazine spreads showed elegance and charm. Television appearances captured her radiant smile. Concert audiences saw a confident young star standing beside Motown's finest performers. But fame has a way of hiding what cameras cannot see. Behind the polished image and graceful stage presence, Tammi was beginning to struggle physically. At first, it seemed minor. Occasional headaches, moments of dizziness, sudden waves of fatigue that felt deeper than normal exhaustion. Long rehearsals became harder to endure. Stage lights felt hotter. Travel felt heavier. Sleep came less easily. Still, the schedule never slowed. Motown's rise depended on constant visibility. Tours across states, back-to-back recording sessions, television specials, promotional appearances, and interviews. The label had built a hit-making machine, and every artist inside it had a role to play. Tammi's role was vital. Her duets were climbing the charts. Her public image symbolized grace and romance. Her presence helped define Motown's golden era. So she pushed forward, through discomfort, through pain, through warning signs her body desperately tried to send. Those close to her noticed subtle changes. Moments where her energy dipped without explanation. Times when she needed to sit down between takes. Expressions of quiet discomfort she tried to mask with professionalism. But in the 1960s music industry, vulnerability was often misunderstood as weakness. Artists were expected to perform, to deliver, to endure. Admitting physical limits could risk lost opportunities, delayed releases, and financial setbacks for an entire label operation. So Tammi kept smiling. Makeup covered the strain on her face. Stage lighting hid the fatigue in her eyes. Elegant gowns concealed the tension in her posture. Night after night, she stepped in front of thousands, appearing joyful, appearing strong, appearing unstoppable. Inside, however, her body was fighting a silent battle. Headaches intensified into sharp, pounding pain. Balance became unpredictable. There were moments she felt disoriented, as if the world around her briefly shifted out of focus. Still, she reassured colleagues she was fine, because slowing down felt impossible, because disappointing fans felt unbearable, because young stars are often taught that success must be protected at any cost. And in an industry driven by momentum, there is rarely space to pause. What no one realized at the time was that Tammi's determination to keep going would soon collide with a medical crisis that could no longer be hidden. The stage that once lifted her voice would become the place where her body finally gave in. By the fall of 1967, the strain had become impossible to ignore. Tammi Terrell was pushing herself beyond safe limits, determined not to disappoint fans, producers, or her duet partner Marvin Gaye. Concert dates continued stacking up. Cities blurred together. Applause masked exhaustion. Pain became part of her daily routine. Then came the night that would change everything. October 14th, 1967. Hampton Sydney College, Virginia. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation as Tammi and Marvin stepped onto the stage. The crowd cheered loudly, eager to hear the beloved duo perform their romantic hits. Stage lights beamed down. The band began to play. Tammi sang beautifully, as she always did. But those watching closely noticed something different. Her movements seemed slower. Her energy appeared fragile. Halfway through the performance, without warning, Tammi's body began to weaken. The music continued, but she couldn't. Dizzy and disoriented, she stumbled forward, collapsing directly into Marvin Gaye's arms. At first, the audience reacted with confusion. Some thought it was part of the show, a dramatic moment in the performance. But Marvin knew immediately something was terribly wrong. He held her upright as stagehands rushed in. The music stopped. Whispers filled the venue. Panic replaced applause. Backstage, the situation grew more serious. Tammi drifted in and out of consciousness. Her breathing was strained. Her body trembled with weakness. Emergency medical care was arranged immediately. The diagnosis that followed would shock everyone around her. Doctors discovered a malignant brain tumor. She was only 22 years old. The vibrant young woman whose voice carried joy across America was now facing a life-threatening illness few could have imagined. Surgery was scheduled quickly. Then came another, and another. Hospital rooms replaced tour buses. Medical equipment replaced studio microphones. Bright surgical lights replaced stage spotlights. The transition from rising star to critically ill patient happened almost overnight. Yet, even as Tammi fought for her life, the music industry machine continued moving forward. Deadlines remained. Album plans continued. Marketing campaigns pressed on. Some recording sessions would later be completed using previously recorded vocal takes. In other cases, background singers were quietly used to help finish tracks. Fans listening at home had no idea. They still heard love songs on the radio, still heard harmony, still heard what sounded like musical perfection. But behind those polished recordings was a young woman enduring immense physical pain and emotional fear. Marvin Gaye took the situation especially hard. Friends later described him as devastated, blaming himself and struggling with helplessness as he watched his partner suffer. Their once joyful performances were replaced by hospital visits and whispered conversations about uncertain futures. The magical duet that had defined Motown romance was now overshadowed by reality. A reality filled with operating rooms, recovery beds, and long stretches of silence. And for Tammi Terrell, life would never return to what it once was. Hospital corridors became the new backdrop of Tammi Terrell's life. The steady beeping of medical machines replaced the rhythm of drums and bass lines. White walls replaced cheering crowds. And long nights of recovery replaced the adrenaline of live performance. Following her diagnosis, Tammi endured multiple brain surgeries, each one risky, each one draining, each one followed by painful recovery periods that tested her physical and emotional limits. The procedures left visible scars, but the deeper wounds were invisible. Persistent headaches lingered. Speech became slower at times. Balance and coordination required careful effort. Simple tasks that once felt effortless now demanded strength she struggled to find. Friends and family visited often, trying to lift her spirits with stories from outside the hospital walls. They brought flowers, music, and gentle encouragement. But hope existed in fragile supply. Tammi understood what was happening to her. She knew her career had been interrupted. She knew the spotlight was drifting elsewhere. And for a young woman whose life revolved around music, the silence felt devastating. Meanwhile, Marvin Gaye wrestled with his own emotional turmoil. He had not only lost a duet partner, he had lost a close friend. Those who knew him said he became withdrawn, deeply affected by the unfairness of it all. Watching Tammi's vibrant spirit fade left a lasting emotional scar that would influence his music for years to come. Within Motown Records, the pace never slowed. New artists emerged. Fresh voices filled recording booths. New hits climbed the charts. The industry machine continued moving forward, driven by schedules and sales figures. But Tammy's absence left a quiet space no chart-topping single could truly replace. Occasionally, she tried to remain connected to the music world, listening to recordings, speaking softly about future plans, imagining a day she might return to the stage. Yet each passing month made that dream more distant. Strength faded gradually. Public appearances stopped completely. The glamorous gowns, bright makeup, and flashing cameras were replaced by hospital gowns and soft-spoken conversations. Tammi faced her condition with remarkable courage. Nurses later described her as gentle and polite, often thanking medical staff despite her discomfort. Even in suffering, she carried grace. But beneath that bravery was heartbreak. She was only in her early 20s, an age filled with possibility, yet her world had narrowed to treatment schedules and uncertain tomorrows. The music that once defined her life now played quietly from bedside radios, a reminder of what had been, and a painful echo of what might never be again. On March 16, 1970, the music world fell silent. After years of surgeries, treatments, and unimaginable physical strain, Tammi Terrell passed away at just 24 years old. The vibrant young woman whose voice once radiated warmth through radios across America was gone. Her passing marked the end of a life filled with promise, a career that had only begun to reveal its full brilliance. News of her death spread quickly through radio broadcasts, newspapers, and television reports. Fans struggled to process the loss. To many, Tammi represented innocence, romance, and the golden sound of Motown's most heartfelt era. Her duets had become the soundtrack to weddings, first dances, and young love stories across the country. Now, those same songs carried a different weight, a bittersweet reminder of a voice silenced too soon. Within the music industry, the grief felt deeply personal. Artists who had shared stages and studios with Tammi spoke of her kindness and gentle spirit. She was remembered not as a diva, but as warm, polite, and genuinely supportive of those around her. Behind the scenes, producers and musicians reflected on how fragile success truly was. Fame had placed Tammi on a pedestal, but it could not shield her from illness, exhaustion, or the limits of the human body. For Marvin Gaye, the loss was devastating. Friends later revealed he withdrew emotionally, struggling with guilt and heartbreak. Some believed witnessing Tammi's decline changed him permanently, shaping the deeper emotional tone heard in his later recordings. Their musical partnership had felt effortless, almost destined. And now it ended in tragedy. Tammi's funeral brought together family, friends, and members of the Motown community who came to pay their respects. Floral arrangements surrounded her casket. Soft hymns filled the air. Tears flowed freely. It was a quiet, solemn goodbye to a young woman who had given so much joy to the world while silently carrying her own suffering. She was laid to rest in Philadelphia, the city where her journey first began, a full circle that felt both poetic and heartbreaking. Her story forced difficult conversations about the hidden costs of fame, the pressure placed on young performers, the physical toll of relentless touring, the emotional strain of living under constant expectation. Tammi Terrell's life became a reminder that behind every polished performance is a human being vulnerable to pain. A star may shine brightly, but even the brightest lights can fade too soon. Though her life was brief, Tammi Terrell left a musical imprint that time has never erased. Her recordings continue to echo across generations, carried by radio waves, film soundtracks, streaming playlists, and nostalgic vinyl collections cherished by devoted fans. The duets she performed with Marvin Gaye remain some of the most beloved love songs ever recorded, timeless expressions of devotion that still feel intimate decades later. Their chemistry became a blueprint for future musical partnerships. Artists who followed studied how their voices intertwined so naturally, not competing, but complementing each other like two halves of the same story. Music historians often point to their collaborations as defining moments in soul and R&B history. But Tammi's legacy extends beyond chart success. Her story helped reveal the hidden pressures placed on young performers, especially women navigating an industry that often prioritized production schedules over personal well-being. In the years following her passing, conversations about artist health, touring demands, and mental resilience became more visible topics within the music world. Her life became part of that larger awareness, a symbol of the human cost behind polished entertainment. Listeners today hear something deeper in her voice, a tenderness, a sincerity, an emotional purity that feels untouched by ego or excess. There is vulnerability in her performances that modern audiences still connect with instantly. When Tammi sang about love, longing, and commitment, it sounded real because it came from a place of emotional honesty. New generations continue discovering her music, often unaware of the hardships she endured behind the scenes. And when they learn her story, the songs gain new meaning, transforming from catchy melodies into emotional time capsules of resilience and grace. Tribute performances, documentaries, and retrospectives regularly honor her contributions to soul music's golden era. She is remembered not only as a gifted singer, but as a gentle spirit whose professionalism and kindness left lasting impressions on everyone she worked with. Even fellow artists who rose to fame after her passing cite the Motown era she helped shape as a major influence on their own musical paths. In this way, her voice never truly faded. It simply changed form, living on through speakers, stages, and hearts around the world. Tammi Terrell's story reminds us that legacy is not measured by years lived, but by the emotional truth an artist leaves behind. Some voices entertain, some voices inspire, and a rare few continue to comfort the world long after the spotlight dims.